Hi, everyone. Back here with new stories. It seems like I'm always telling stories on this blog. Well, ever since I was a kid, people have mocked me or occasionally praised me for being a storyteller. And I'm thinking, why? Why do I like stories so much? Why do I like to tell them? And I realized that my whole family is a bunch of storytellers. My mom and my dad, both my brothers. But the real champ of the family was my grandma, my dad's mom. And she could take a story that really didn't have much of anything to it, and she had a way of telling that story to make it sound like the most interesting thing that ever happened. And when we were kids, my brothers and I, we would be babysat by grandma occasionally. And you know how reluctant kids are to go to bed. But she would tell us, if you'll go to bed, I'll tell you a story. And man, this was like telling us we're going to watch a movie. We just dashed into bed. And she would cast a spell over us with this story of hers. And so maybe I picked it up there, this love of stories. So rather than apologizing, I should just say from now on, it's a congenital defect. And that's just the way I am. I write that way too. Of course, those of you who've read my stories know that. I'm a storyteller. I think we find meaning in stories. And a little like history, you can put all the philosophy aside and ask yourself, but what do people actually do? What do they say? And I think that's where we find things out. And so that's what I do. And I've got another story for you today. I was telling you last week about living in Malibu, where I was a gardener and looked after some kids and lived in a tent because there wasn't a house there yet. And John and Debbie, the two doctors I worked for, a very fond memory, had cleaned out a horse stable for themselves. And they lived there more or less. And there was a rickety old trailer where the kids were that had light and running water by the time I got there, which was better than it started out. But they still had no phone and no toilet. There was an outhouse. I mean, here we are, we're living in Malibu, and we're going to the outhouse because the house hadn't been built yet. And the phone was something for the construction workers. They installed one on the telephone post, kind of nailed to the telephone post. And we were very sensitive to its ring. I could be clear up at the other end of the property, which was a full acre, and I'd hear the phone ringing and dash all the way across the place and get there before they hung up. But I have a particular story about that summer of theatrical disaster. I may have mentioned to you earlier that I was a theater major. And John and Debbie were going to hold an outdoor party because they couldn't hold an indoor one, could they? There was no indoors. And invited a lot of their friends, and they asked me if I wanted to do a play. So, it's entertainment in the middle of it. So I asked my friend Mike Cruz if he wanted to do a play called The Zoo Story, which is a very good one-act play. I don't know if anybody does it anymore, that ends in a stabbing. And so it's tense and yet has a lot of laughs up until the end when it gets very serious. So there we are doing this outdoors, and it was going over pretty well, I think, for people who'd come for a party. They were actually paying quite a bit of attention to what we were doing. And everything was going fine until right towards the end, right when it gets really serious. And this knife comes out. And of course, somebody had brought a German Shepherd with him. And the dog starts growling, really not liking, I think, maybe the hostility coming off the stage, but he really got upset when the knife came out. Well, he calmed down after a moment, and I thought, okay, we're going to be fine. I mean, a few people kind of giggled, but we got him back, I think. And then comes the big moment when I'm holding the knife, and as the play goes, Mike will throw himself on the knife because he's trying to make a connection, and he wants this fellow that I was playing to never forget it, and that's the way he did it. Well, the way you do this scene, if you're really going to do it well, is you get some tin, and you kind of fold that around you, and you tape it down, and over that you put a couple of inches of styrofoam, and you tape that over that, and then you get a baggie with artificial blood that you make up yourself. And it was great. It was about half red food coloring, half Hershey's chocolate syrup. And so it really looks awful when it starts coming out. And it's cool because the audience is expecting, you know, a knife with a retractable blade. You'll go like that, and then, you know, the blade will still be there. Or they think you're just going to fake the stabbing, put it under his arm, and pretend like he stabbed. But no, you got this knife sticking out of you. And it really makes an impact. But what happens? The bag gets punctured. The chocolate starts coming out with the red food coloring, and the dog smells it. Or maybe he was a red food coloring addict, but I think what he liked was the chocolate. So here we are going through the most dramatic moment of the whole play, trying to wrap the thing up, very touching, and here comes this German Shepherd bounding onto our stage and starts licking Mike's stomach, lapping up the chocolate. And it was just awful. You know, he's trying to get these great lines out. I'm trying to get my lines out. And the dog's licking Mike, and I'm trying to pull the dog off of him, but, you know, he wants the chocolate. And, well, it didn't matter what our lines were, because nobody would have heard him anyway. They're all laughing their butts off, because this is the funniest thing they've ever seen. And we were just humiliated. Finally, the guy who owned the dog came up on our stage and brought the dog away, and we finished off the play. We probably shouldn't have even bothered, but that's how bad things can go sometimes. And the play itself was quite a story, and this is a little story about plays. I should add that my latest book, To Live and Die in the Floating World, is on half price from our distributor. I'm going to put a little note out tomorrow, so alert audiences should be looking for a note. And also the ebook is available on, at least through the end of the month, through all of the online platforms, whether it's Amazon or Barnes & Noble. I think even Target even has an e-reader, but at least Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And it'll be on for 99 cents as a promotion for my book. And so that's all for this week, and I'll come back next week with either a story or more discussion following the world. I tell so many stories. Anyway, all the best. See you next week.